Okay, can you guys can still see my screen on the new to customer success? Okay, good. All right, so welcome everybody to week 4 of our new to customer success webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about insights reporting. Week 1 we covered stack alignment, customer detail part 1. Week 2 was customer segments and customer detail part 2. Last week we covered customer dashboard and pipeline management. So today we're going to get into insights reporting, and that's my favorite subject when it comes to customer success. And then next week we do have a 5th Wednesday this month, so we will be talking, more about customer detail in general, and then we'll just open it up to whatever you guys have, questions wise in customer success. So when we talk about insights reporting, we're talking about this under management, this insights section here that shows under alpha. And I would say that that's probably still accurate because so much of it is manual and we're still building a lot of this out. What I did prior to this call was I went and I built some data and tried to kind of build a backstory behind these 3 companies. We're looking at Creative Designs, Dharma Enterprises, and Dunder Mifflin here. Okay. I filtered by last quarter. What's so cool about insights is you can go back, through any period, this month, last month, this quarter, last quarter, last 3 months, next 3 months, next 12, last 12, and then, year to date, as well as any custom, date range that you want. Okay. And then much like the other screens, we've got our filters here for company health, account manager, account group, and then segments. Okay. Now, with this report, you can filter by tags if you want. And so in this particular case, I created an insights. No, this is actually going to be based on your tags for the stack alignment, your stack manager tags. So when we filter by tags, we're actually filtering by the tag that's on the company. Okay. You remember, you can set that on the company profile. So just wanted to specify that. So when we're looking at the insights report, okay, what's so cool about this report is it gives you all of the information that you need off of your business review process. Okay. So I'm actually going to unhide the account manager column because I hid that earlier before I jumped on the call, and now I realize that it's super important to be able to see this. If you're comfortable with where everything is, then it doesn't matter. You can hide it, still filter by account manager anyway. But this is what it looks like out of the box. As you're building out your insights and stuff, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see your company on the left, then your next meeting date, and then your last meeting date. And then we'll have the last meeting score. So whatever that score was for that last meeting, then the BR score delta. So what that is that's looking at the difference between the last score and the previous score. That doesn't, so the very last meeting that you just had, what that score is versus the previous meeting before that. Okay. And then the difference between the 2 scores. And then it's going to tell you, what that delta is. Then we've got, go ahead.
So on that, the second one there, the last meeting was 100. So the previous
so I've already so I've submitted a bug out request on this because it's showing a difference of 12, and that is correct, but it's in red instead of green because the last meeting was an 88 and it went from 88 to 100, so that should show in green, like this one does, where I'll show you guys here in a minute, but the previous score before this was 50, so it was a plus 38 delta, right? So in this case it should be plus 12, but it's actually showing negative 12, and I'm not sure why that is, but I've already brought that up. So what you're going to see here on the delta is your red, yellow, green, yellow if there's no change, blue if there's no information, and then green if there's a positive change on the delta. Then we've got our account managers column, which I had hidden just because it makes it easier to, kind of see everything else. But like I said, you don't need to see this necessarily. If you know who the account managers are, then you're just going to go up here and filter by whatever account manager you want to get the view that you want, right? Then we've got company effort and then company health, right? So we know what those are. Those are coming from the customer detail screen and the profile. The segment that the customer falls into. And then we've got the total tech debt, which you guys should be pretty familiar with by now. And then we start to get into the recommendations. And this is where this kind of drives me crazy. And I think it's more of a thing with the size of my monitor than anything else. But I have to go down to the bottom so I can get this. So then we go into our recommendations and we start to see number of completed recommendations, number of completed recommendations total, right? So whatever the total dollar amount is on those completed recommendations, then number of declined recommendations total, not started, not started with the cost, and then number of recommendations started, and then the started cost for that, right? So that all makes sense. We're looking at it from completed to declined to not started to started, right? And you can reorder those however you want to make it make sense to you. But I think that, by default, it actually makes, a lot of sense. And then over here at the end, we're looking at our business review score history. And so that's going to paint some kind of a picture for you. And then those questions on the business review screen, did the decision maker show? Did we meet on cadence? Did they accept our recommendations? And did our stack alignment improve? So those are the default questions. You guys can make those edits from the business review manager side of the house on under VCIO account settings. And you can actually change and or add, subtract questions from there. But these are the ones that, come out of the box, right? And so then you're looking at 4 questions, out of 100%, each question is going to be weighted 25%, right? So what I did prior to the call, like I said, was I actually built out some data for Creative Designs, Dharm Enterprises, and Dunder Mifflin. So we have 3 different stories going on here, right? And I'm also tweaked the effort and company health on these companies too, to kind of help, support what's going on with the business reviews. So in this particular case, Creative Designs, right? Company effort 51, company health 72. So they're kind of like right in the middle. They're, a middling company, right? We're in the midway point as far as the amount of effort that we put in as an MSP to manage, this customer. And then their health is not the best, but it's not terrible either. And they're actually in segment D, which means, high effort, low value, right? So that's something to keep an eye on. And then we've got our tech debt here. But what I did was I wanted to show what it looks like when you start digesting these recommendations numbers, right? So I don't know if you guys have spent a ton of time on this, and I'm going to jump back and forth between VCIO and customer success so that this makes sense. But what we're seeing when we see these numbers of, completed recommendations versus declined recommendations versus not started and started is these are looking at recommendations from the business review screen. Okay. So it's not just recommendations that have been created for the company. It's actually recommendations that have been tied to business reviews. So if I go back to the VCIO screen, and then I'm just going to go to business reviews. And there's a lot going on under Creative Designs. So forgive, but I just went and created 3 business reviews. Now, we say QBR, and these were obviously 1 month apart, but I was trying to create a view for last quarter. So I just did, 3 reviews over that quarter. And so we can see, 75, 50, and 88 where the scores on those, right? And then here is the column for recommendations that are associated. So if I drill into this one from April, we can see that score 75% is based on the fact that, we're getting a total, full 25 on these yes questions. Did they show? Did we meet on cadence? And then we're getting a partial on, did recommendations get accepted? Partially yes. And then did stack alignment improve? Partially yes. So those make up the other 25% to give us a 75. Go ahead, Brian.
I just want to have a clarifying question. I heard you mention that the recommendations on the insights view will only show up if they're linked to a business review.
Yeah.
If that's the case, is there technically another status when you're looking at the insights view that would be recommendations not tied to a business review yet, right?
So we're only looking at the ones that are tied to business reviews. So
Yeah.
it would have to be in a status of either, completed, in progress, declined, or not started.
So I guess my concern there is that from a manager perspective, right? Or even if you're CSM, VCIO, how do you quickly identify recommendations that haven't been tied to a business review yet? Right. Let's say, hey, we got another business review coming up. Which recommendations haven't we talked about yet, or haven't been tied, or you know what I mean? That aren't getting measured on that insights page because they don't show up yet. Right? Does that make sense?
Yep. No, that's a great question. So we don't have anything built out on the roadmap yet. So that would be a great location for that, so that when you're looking at the roadmap, which would be your overall picture of all recommendations for that client, you would see your tags, your priority, the status, and then ideally, this would be a great place to put a column for, any scheduled business review. And if it's not scheduled, then we know it's not tied to a BR, right? So that's a great question. There is no, current way to look at, like if you're on the asset list, you can tell if an asset's tied to a recommendation or not. Over here on the far right, we've got that recommendation column. So ideally, based on what you're saying, it would be good if we had a column like that in the recommendation screen that indicates whether this recommendation is tied to a business review or not.
And I think it's important to be able to add them to the business review from here too, because this is generally, you're looking at the whole picture of reviews,
right?
Decide which ones we want to add,
right?
Do it.
So right now, the only way to do that is from the business review screen, and then you can see if there are recommendations tied. There is that column there that shows you if there are recommendations, but you would have to know specifically what the title of that recommendation is, and what the status is in order to find really what you're looking for. And then in order to tie it, you have to drill into the business review and then go, linked recommendations and go ahead and, add a recommendation there. So great question, great suggestions, guys. I think that it makes the most sense for it to land on the recommendations roadmap, because that's your big picture of what's going on with all of your recommendations. So noted for sure. that makes a ton of sense. So then, kind of getting back to the business reviews for creative designs, looking at last quarter. So we went from, 75 to 50 to an 88, and we can see all the recommendations that are tied to those particular reviews. That's based on the questions that were answered. So now if I go back to customer success insights, I'm still on last quarter. So it's just going to pull up exactly what I want to see. So now when we look at these questions over here, and our business review score history, it starts to make more sense. So we're looking at the questions answered for the most recent review, right? Did the decision maker show? Did we meet on cadence? Did they accept our recommendations? And our stack alignment approved? And then the score history starts to kind of paint a picture for what's going on, with the relationship with this particular customer, at least based on the view that I'm using. So in this case, last quarter, looking at only Q2, we can see that, their score spiked and then, went down, and that spiked based on the fact that there were no previous scored business reviews. Get to you in just a second, Brian. Then it came down to 50, and then it went up to an 88. So what happens is it actually levels off, right? Similarly with Dharma Enterprises, the story that I wanted to tell here, and basically what I'm trying to say with creative designs is this is your middle of the road customer, right? They're the ones that have middling health, middling effort. The MRR is not super high, but that doesn't matter in this case because this view actually eliminates MRR from the equation so that you can make decisions blindly without, thinking about what their MRR is. And then that business review score history should kind of match, that story, that effort, and that, health score with the company. This particular customer is in the middle of the road. So yes, they're pretty easy to deal with somewhat. We meet on cadence, but sometimes they don't accept all of our recommendations. So, they're middle of the road. Dharma, just a second, Brian. Dharma, on the other hand, and now I lost my scroll bar, so I have to go all the way over and grab it again. So like I said, I think this is my laptop that's actually causing these problems for me because of the resolution. So Dharma Enterprises. Now, the picture that I'm painting here is, this customer effort is low for us and their health is high, so that's good. So they fall into the C bracket right now, which is, low effort, technically low value right now. And if I go to their customer profile, I think their MRR is only like 1,400 a month, which is below that 3,500 segment value, right? But then we can see, the recommendations that are tied to their business reviews and what those look like from an MRR standpoint, or I should say a dollar standpoint. And the important thing here with Dharma is they've actually accepted all of their recs. And again, I apologize for having to jump around here so that I can get to that. So they've accepted all of the recommendations that we've thrown their way. And so we've got, a dollar value in completed. We don't have any decline or not started recs through them. And then we can see that score history is actually on an upward trajectory. Brian, let me show this and then I'll get to your question. So if I go back to VCIO and I switch to Dharma, then I go to that business review screen. This is going to make sense because you can see the reason why they're on an upward trajectory on the business review score is because they went from a 75 to an 88 to a 100, and they accepted all of our recommendations. Now, the only issue that we have that was brought up by Matt is that we're actually showing a -12 in the BR score delta between the last two reviews, and it's obviously +12 between 88 and 100. So I've already brought that to Dev's attention. Go ahead, Brian. You're muted.
We're in business reviews right now. Can you hit the add new button?
Yeah.
I'm curious on that other view. We have two different types of meeting types on that far right side. We have a business review and a check-in meeting.
Yep.
And so are you able to filter by meeting type on that other view, or is it just referencing the last meeting no matter what meeting type it was?
So on the insight screen, it's simply looking at the last meeting. Let me go back to customer success real quick. So inside, looking at the last meeting, there we go. So it's looking at last meeting. It doesn't matter what the actual meeting type was. So that's another great point. I already see where you're going with that. The ability to look at different meeting types, right? Because you have 2, but somebody may have 4, somebody may have 6. We've got a whole bunch in the demo environment for various reasons, but I actually created an insights meeting type because I wanted to make sure that all of the BRs that I put together and recommendations that I tied to it wouldn't get moved by anybody that demos or our dev team or anything like that. So to have a column here where you could go by meeting type and see, the different scores between those types and differentiate between one meeting, type and another would be huge. So
yeah, and I'm even thinking I'd probably have different grading questions for the different meeting types, right? Because during a check,
they're not always going to be the same.
We're not going to be really talking recommendations, right? It's more, are we meeting expectations? There's going to be other questions we want to know the answers to on how a check-in meeting went versus a VCIO meeting.
Well, both of these screens, the insights report on customer success and business reviews are getting an overhaul. So, and a lot of this, is going to be automated and or tied to your PSA, which right now it's not, right? All of this has to be set up by you guys, and you guys have to manually manage the business review process and tie your recommendations to it in order for this screen to make sense. But it's still a powerful screen. It just requires, the manual steps of you going in and tying recommendations to all of your reviews in order for you to get the insights here, right? But the reason why this is important is because then we get to Dunder Mifflin, right? And I think I did a pretty good job painting a picture of Dunder Mifflin. Anybody who knows The Office, right, knows that Dunder Mifflin existed in spite of itself, right? And and the Scranton office was terrible, and it was mismanaged, and a lot of stupid stuff went down at the Dunder Mifflin Scranton branch, right? So here, we can see our effort is higher than we'd like it to be, right? And the company health is, middle of the road, but it's lower, so it's kind of in rough shape. We can see what their last business review score was. And actually, if I go to the VCIO screen, I want to actually show, what's going on with Dunder Mifflin, because in my mind, they were purchased by Sabre printers, right? So now we're looking at this from a history standpoint, saying, okay, 417, again, remember, we're looking at last quarter. So 417, 515, and 619, we can see that since the merger with Sabre, right, our business review scores have tanked, right? We went from an 88 to a 62 to a 50 to a 25. And then we can see all of our recommendations are getting declined. Now, as a good account manager, relationship manager, salesperson, hopefully you're keeping good notes. I didn't have time to go through and add notes on every single one of these. But the general consensus here with Dunder Mifflin is, since the merger with their parent company, they're tanking. The relationship has become cumbersome for us as the MSP, and it's very difficult to make any headway or do business with these guys now, right? So if we look at the insights screen does paint that picture, because we can see last meeting score actually went down by 12 points. And then, company effort, like I said, is higher than we'd like it to be. Health is down. Their tech debt is high. And so, we think that based on tech debt, they have a good MRR, which they do. They're above average on the MRR. But the reason why we want to ignore that when we're looking at the insights is because sometimes you're going to have to look at things big picture without thinking about the but, right? Because when you're looking at, how terribly things are going with Dunder Mifflin, they declined all three of our recommendations last quarter, and look how much money that cost us, right? Like, this is the amount of money that was left on the table. And one of those was, by the way, a monthly service over the course of 2 years, and that's why it's so high. But so they declined all of our recommendations since the merger. And in one of those I mentioned, they didn't show on Cadence, and then the business review status was actually canceled rather than completed. So they didn't show up. They declined. They didn't review our report that we prepared for them. So things have become difficult with Dunder Mifflin. And when we scroll all the way over, we can see that business review score history has tanked, right? As opposed to where Dharma Enterprises has gone up, because Dharma, I believe they're actually a dental office or something in our system. But the point with Dharma was that they were newer getting into the MSP space. Like, they didn't really have an MSP prior to this. And since coming on board, they've been nothing but a joy to work with. They listen to everything we have to say to them, and they accept all of our recommendations. Like, who wouldn't want that customer, right? Where Dunder Mifflin, since their merger, have tanked. And like I said, for obvious reasons, it's become very difficult to work with them. So this is a snapshot, so that you, as the CTO or the VCIO, or maybe even the head of the company, as you're looking at this insight report, can say, let's take the MRR out of it, which is around 3,700 a month or something. Is the juice worth the squeeze? Now that we know that they're under new management, And it's become really difficult to try to have a sit down conversation with them and show them the value that we add to their organization. So not knowing what the MRR is, looking at the screen, should we just consider firing them, right? Like, who wants to deal with what's going on with Dunder Mifflin? So that's what, the point of the insight screen is it's to show you as the account manager what's going on with your business reviews and your recommendations and how everything's going. And then, the boss comes through, the sales manager, the team lead over, your relationship management team, and they can say, okay, here's big picture what's going on with their tech debt. Here's all of our accepted recommendations. Here are all the ones that we haven't started, and so on and so forth, and break down those numbers. And then you see that business review score history, and you can see, what's going on, big picture with the customer. I'm only looking at last quarter, but you could build this into the future and say, let me see next 12 months. This is going to be a horrible example because I didn't have any good data to build out into the future. But if you're proactively building out future recommendations based on those reds, on the future reds on your asset list and stuff, and saying, okay, we know that, in 2 years, I need to get this server replaced. These workstations are going to need to be replaced. Their MFA is going to need to be updated, all that stuff, right? So if you're building out recommendations based on current services and current assets and future expiration dates, then okay, those recommendations can be tied to your future business reviews. And if you guys are using the business review screen properly, at least the way that it's been, built out most recently, you can auto schedule your business reviews. So, we just went in there and started one on 7/7 and said, I want to meet, every month on this date for, the next, not every month, sorry, but every quarter it should be 7/7, 1/7. Yep. So 7/7, 10/7, 1/7. So you can see that that cadence going, and it's to meet once a quarter, for the next year, and then it will auto schedule out the following year as well. We just have multiple cadences going on here right now, so it doesn't make any sense. But if you're using it properly, you're using the magic wand to auto schedule your cadence for you, and then you can go and tie future recommendations to future reviews, so that when you're reviewing the insight screen, you can go and look at the next 12 months or the next quarter out into the future, and everything in the future is going to tell you what should happen over the next 12 months, right? Things can change, but based on the data that we have with our recommendations out into the next year or two, and our recommendations roadmap, and those business reviews scheduled out for the next 12 to 24 months, then we can actually show what those recommendations totals and stuff should look like over that time, right? So the insight screen is super powerful. It just requires that you do the manual monitoring and the process of setting up your business reviews, tying your recommendations to your business reviews. But then once you have those business reviews set to auto schedule, it's as simple as going in and manually, tying your recommendation to your future review, and then coming into the insight screen and getting an idea of what next quarter looks like, next 6 months, next year, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, you can filter. So like if I just want to see Alex's accounts, I'll just, I'm Alex, or I'm Alex's boss. So I'm going to click on Alex, and then I'm going to say, just show me all of those. And that's why I started with Creative Designs, Dunder Mifflin, and Dharma Enterprises. So I could say, just show me Alex's accounts, and let's take a look at what's going on with, his book, right? So, I don't know that there's much more to go over here, guys. Questions? Please. Oh, let me look at chat. Maybe chat will help. Yeah, exactly, Brian. So Brian made that comment about if we gave Dwight access to customers from the IT team. Yeah, Dwight is very anti-customer service. so
Bears beats BDR process.
What is going on right now?
I'm curious, it, we haven't talked about any reporting capabilities from this view, right? Let's say you had a manager overseeing an account team. Do you have those icons available up there at the top where you can normally do a report, or it looks like you can't schedule one yet, but you can at least make a manual one?
Yeah, you can export the view that you're looking at, you know, as a PDF or Word doc, just like you can with the reporting on the VCIO side. But there is no auto schedule like there is with assets right now. But that's coming for a lot of reports on the VCIO side. So I would imagine that eventually they'll get to that on the Insight side as well, of, you know, creating that auto scheduler for reporting purposes, because that's a big thing that they want to tackle, where we can do that with assets and, you know, make that happen for the other screens on the VCIO side as well. So it's probably just, you know, a matter of time before that happens with Insights as well.
And then, you know, another thing that comes to mind is this is a lot of information on a single page across all your clients, right?
Right.
So I see this as great for referencing, right? And kind of getting everything looking as green as possible. But I'm wondering, how are we managing, you know, what should be our next actions here, or what's the client we've touched that we haven't touched in a long time? So I'm wondering, like, I almost feel like there should be a column here where it's like last updated or last relevant info that was pulled from, you know, to calculate these numbers.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think that last meeting date would be a really good indication if you're not touching clients often enough, because, you know, then it's going to show you, like, if you haven't met with them in 6 months or something like that, then you're going to see that, and then you'll be able to, you know, just filter by last meeting date. And then if it's, you know, blank and or it's from 6 months ago, then, you know, like, hey, we're not meeting on cadence with this particular individual, right? So
I like that idea, and that's fair from like an account manager perspective, right? And managing, you know, what needs attention. What about me as a manager, right? If I get a monthly report, do I want to have to look through the whole report and digest everything? Or do I just care about what's changed since the report I got last month?
Right.
So now you're dealing with, like, from a management perspective, it's like, okay, great, you've got all this data in here. I don't want to have to analyze the whole report every single month. I just want to understand what have you
key indicators.
Month, right.
I know you're still recording. I don't know if we're kind of getting into the Q&A, but
well, that's a good point. That's a good point, actually. Let me just go ahead and you know, stop the recording before. So thanks for attending week 4, guys. Bye-bye.